morning. Good morning to each of you. I am Dr. Corrine Johnson, and I would like to welcome each of you on this morning to plug into the power of prayer. I am so grateful and thankful to God for each of you on this morning, for pressing your way up to get on here to hear how the Lord is positioning us to walk in a place of prosperity, not just in our finances, not just in our health, but also in our emotions and our marriages. He wants us to walk in prosperity in every single area of our lives. And so on this morning, as always, as you all are coming in, give me a shout out, say good morning, so that I will know that you are here. And as you are saying good morning, please go ahead on and like, tag, and share the video with as many people as you can so that we can spread the word of the Lord, so that not only just us that gather here in the morning can get the revelation of how to walk in prosperity, but other people so that their lives can be changed as well. And so we honor God as always. We thank him for allowing us to get here this morning, this Wednesday morning. We call it hump day, right? We get halfway the week, so we say we only got 2 more days to go before the weekend. And so we thank God for hump day today. And so we honor the Lord. We thank him for how he's kept us and how he's going to continue to do great and mighty things in our emotions, in our lives, in our marriages, just how he's going to move throughout areas of our lives. And so on this morning, as we get ready to continue our series entitled Walking in Prosperity. And for those of you, if this is your first time tuning in with us, welcome. And I want to encourage you to go to my YouTube page, Dr. Corrine Johnson, and watch this series from the beginning. If you're just now kind of tuning in, or if some of you all are tuning in midways, go back to the beginning of the series and watch it, so you can know how to walk in financial prosperity, how to walk in prosperity in your health, in your marriages, as a single person. Go back and watch it so that you can be blessed. And so on this morning, we're going to be focusing in on, can a soul be wounded? And so when we think about the word trauma, in the Greek, that word means wound. And so a lot of times we make things very complicated, but it's very simple, because the reason why trauma is related to as a wound is because when you just think about a regular wound, right? Let's say you cut yourself with a knife. And so if you cut yourself with a knife and you don't try to clean up the wound and try to put some Neosporin on it, and then, cover it up with a Band-Aid so it can heal, you're going to continue to bleed out, right? And so a lot of times that's what we do when it comes down to traumatic experiences that happen in our lives. We try to, when the wound takes place, we just try to cover it up with a Band-Aid. We don't try to put any type of healing balm on it, so that the healing balm of Gilead can begin to bring healing to that wound. A lot of times we just walk around wounded. We just walk around, and we're not even really trying to do a whole lot to make sure that we heal it. A lot of times we just want to put a Band-Aid on it and forget about it, right? And so when we think about trauma, it is a wound, because that wound has you in a place to where you're walking around and you're constantly having a conversation with your past. You're constantly having a conversation with, why did Uncle Bobo abuse me? You're constantly having a conversation that's saying, why did my parents walk away and give me up for adoption? That's what trauma causes you to do. It causes you to continuously have a conversation with your past when that wound is not being processed and healed properly. And so sometimes when we are dealing with wounds, it causes us to have panic attacks. Some of us have nightmares. We go through rage, depression. Some of us go through, grief. Sometimes we'll lose a loved one. And because at that moment when it happens, we don't process it through, those emotions are trapped on the inside. And so we never really grieve properly. And so therefore, it causes us to be at a place to where we're kind of like at a standstill because we're not able to move forward past the grief. And so all of those symptoms that I just said, they are results from, the trauma that many of us have experienced. And so we've already established this morning that trauma can be a wound in the mind and in the body. We already talked about that. But I want to take it a step further this morning, because if trauma can be a wound in the mind, and if it can be a wound in our bodies, then the important question for the ask is, can trauma wound the soul? And that is a very important question, because, it can. That's the place where it wounds us at, in our soul. And so this question leads to another question. How do you heal distrust and shame? What about loss of faith or hope, or even your purpose? How do you heal those things? And so most of us tend to think of trauma as something predominantly a mental health issue. But that means that when we experience trauma, mental health professionals are often the first people that, we go to for help, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But what is some of the symptoms that we are experiencing are evidence of a wounded soul rather than a wounded mind or body? And so what if we've been treating only a portion of the problem? And most times we do. Because most of the time when we go through trauma, we'll go to church and we'll pray and we'll have faith in God, and that's great. We'll go see a therapist, and the therapist will begin to, try to help us, process through some things. But if your soul is wounded, then that's another problem. You got to come from another place in order to heal a soul wound. And so certainly, if our wounds are of the mind, then mental health care, that's the best thing for you, right? But we're talking about soul wounds this morning. So mental health professionals are not going to be able to give you the tools that you need to be able to fix your soul health, the issues that you're dealing with. Because when we try to go to a therapist for soul wounds, it's kind of like trying to hammer a nail with a screwdriver. So it might eventually work, but it wouldn't be very effective. And so the spiritual component is crucial, because trauma wounds us in places that medicine and surgery are not going to be able to reach. And so trauma wounds our souls. And what is the enemy after? The enemy is after our soul. He wants our souls to be lost. He wants us to continue to live defeated lives. He wants us to continue to be wrapped up with grave clothes of depression and rape and incest and all the other things on, right? And so, yes, trauma wounds our soul, and these wounds need to be tended to. We don't need to put a Band-Aid over it and try to cover it up and pretend like these things did not happen. So, depending on your preferences and your spiritual beliefs, soul care can take many different forms. But ultimately, soul wounds needs a soul healer. And I believe the only one who can repair a wounded soul is the original manufacturer, and that is God himself. And so that is an indication this morning that we got to make sure that we are in our word, that we are meditating on the word of God. We got to make sure that we are looking inwardly for those things that we know that's not of God. We got to look for those, what we talked about on yesterday morning, when the check engine light comes on, we got to look for the check engine light that's indicating to us that there's something wrong and that we need help, because you got to allow God to deal with it. I remember it's probably been about maybe 17, 18 years, maybe even longer. I'm not sure. But my best friend died a horrific death. She was coming home from college, and she was married, had 2 kids, went back to school after she got married, and she was driving home, and she had an aneurysm. And when she had an aneurysm, the car flipped and caught a fire. And so she was basically, all basically burned up. And so, when people would see me, they would be like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Because the moment when my mom called me and told me, she asked me, she said, did you hear about what happened to Celeste? And I said, no, what happened? She said, she got a car wreck. And I said, oh, well, what hospital is she in? And my mom went silent. And she was like, she's at Bruton Mortuary. And so I kind of like blocked out what she said. I really blocked it out because I really didn't want to hear what she said. And so anyway, I never took the opportunity to grieve. I never took the opportunity to cry. If people would ask me, are you okay? I didn't even go to her wake because I really didn't want to come face to face with the grief. I went to her funeral, but I didn't go to the wake because I didn't want to feel like I had to get up and say something because we was best friends. I didn't even know if I had the strength to even say anything because I was dealing with some things that was on the inside, but I wasn't going to dare let them show up on the outside because I want to look weak. I don't want to look like, that I couldn't handle it, which really and truly I could not. And so it wasn't until years later, after her death, I was looking through my memory book. I was looking through my high school memory book, and I had a bunch of pictures in there, and I came across this letter, and this is what immediately brought healing to me in with that trapped emotion. There was a letter in there when I had turned 16 years old. Celeste had written me a letter saying to the point that I hope you live to be 100 years and me 100 years too, so that I never have to know that my very best friend have passed away. And so when I read that letter, I began to break literally down. I broke down. I cried for a while. I looked at the pictures and kind of like just processed some things that were on the inside that I had not let go of, that I was holding on to because I was still kind of like in disbelief that, the way that she died had really happened. So God allowed me that moment when I opened up that yearbook and saw the memories and saw the letter and saw the things that we shared as best friends. It literally caused that emotion that was trapped on the inside. I was able to release it at that very moment because that was the time that I was ready to release it. That was the time that I was actually prepared to release the grief and everything else that I had been carrying. And so I had to learn how to give that over to God so that he could heal, me in my soul where that area had been wounded with grief and regret and, why did it have to be her and why this and why that, and so God at his time when we're ready, right? When we're ready, he will begin to cause you to be able to release. He'll cause you to release the grief. He'll cause you to snap up out of the depression. He'll cause you the anxiety to cease. But you got to release that stuff up out of you so that the healing balm of Gilead can begin to flow. And so what are the roots of trauma? Because there's always a root, right? And so for many of us as believers, to more fully understand the role of that God plays in our healing, we really need to go all the way back to the beginning. I'm talking about the actual beginning, in the Bible. If we really want to understand the impact that trauma has on our souls and how our souls can be healed, we're going to have to go back to the beginning, the very first time when trauma occurred. And so I'm talking about the moment when Eve ate the forbidden fruit in the garden. And so in Genesis 3, we read that, Adam and Eve, they was tempted by the serpent. They rejected God's simple instructions and they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And suddenly evil, swept into the world and the first soul wounds were inflicted. And so Adam and Eve, good lives were corrupted because of sin. And so they experienced trauma. So imagine suddenly becoming aware of your faults and your failures and the fact that you're naked all at the same moment. While the word trauma didn't exist at that time, I'm confident that, that's exactly what took place at that very moment with Adam and Eve. They were aware of their faults, their failures, the fact that they were naked, that their sins were exposed before them. That's trauma. So prior to the fall, Adam and Eve's life, they were firmly rooted in a sense of security and belonging and purpose. They were in a safe place. But they were provided for. Nobody was going to harm them. They belonged to each other, and they hung out with God, in the presence of God, right? They didn't struggle with self-esteem. They didn't worry about what anybody else thought about them, because they were managers of the garden. They had a job to do that was completely fulfilling. So they reigned over the fish, the birds, the animals, and Adam even got to name the animals, right? Life was good for them. Security, belonging, and purpose, a life that was flourishing, and so generally speaking, they were in a good place. But then Adam and Eve chose to trust the serpent rather than God. And so for the first time ever, sin intersected their lives, damaging the healthy roots that God had given them, and it changed everything. And so instead of having that security, they felt fear, they felt loss, they felt guilt and shame and regret. So instead of belonging, they felt rejected and hurt, because what? They were no longer able to enjoy the presence of the Lord that they once enjoyed. So instead of knowing their purpose, they felt like they were lost because they were disconnected from the presence of God. And the same thing happens to us. God gave us a root system of security. He gives us a place of belonging and purpose, but trauma comes in and attacks our root system and leaves our souls wounded. So these soul wounds is going to be, in a place to where we got to make sure that we're not allowing the enemy to hold us hostage to those soul wounds, because then we'll start feeling the guilt. We'll start feeling the shame and the regret, but we'll start feeling those wounds of rejection or neglect or abandonment, the wounds of hurt and abuse. And that's where the enemy wants us to be. He wants us to have a loss of identity and purpose. That's the reason why he allows the things to happen early on. If we'll be honest, most of the stuff that happened to us, it happens to us at an early age. Because the enemy wants to get you while you're early on in the early stages. He don't want you to know your identity. He don't want you to know your purpose. And so that's why he allows somebody to come in. The enemy will get into Uncle Bobo and have him touching you in places he ain't got no business touching you. And because the enemy knows that it's going to give you that sense of shame, that sense of regret. Why did this happen to me? That sense of rejection or neglect. Why was my parents not here to protect me? And then you feel that hurt from the abuse. And so we have to understand that the soul wounds, the soul purpose of the enemy, he wants to inflict your soul. He wants to inflict your soul. He wants you to walk around depressed. He wants you to walk around without a purpose. He wants you to walk around and thinking that you're not secured in God. That's what he wants you to do. And so he wants you to have those unhealthy roots that, that are going to produce symptoms of insecurity and anxiety and anger and addictions and fear and suicidal thoughts and all of those things. And so when the roots of our souls are wounded, no amount of effort, willpower, or wishing is going to produce the kind of fruit that we desire. In fact, investing all of our energy trying to change or manage the fruit without first healing the roots will likely, it's going to leave us discouraged and frustrated, and worst of all, still wounded, because we're going to continue to be going round in cycles of defeat because we're trying to heal the fruit, but not the root. It's the root that we got to deal with. So when we focus solely on the mental and physical aspects of healing and overlook the healing of our soul, we're still going to be dealing with the symptoms. So it's only natural that a tree with a damaged root system is not going to be a healthy tree. No matter how much water, no matter how much sunlight and care that it is provided, it probably is not going to yield any fruit. And some of us may be in a place where we're trying to force our healing. You know, we're reading books, we're going to therapy, we getting treatment, we taking medication, we doing the magic dance of healing, and yet we are still not experiencing the breakthrough that we seek. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing all of those things. But if that's you today, don't be discouraged, because those activities are helpful and they're going to aid your healing effort over time. But in your quest to remove the unwanted symptoms from your life, don't neglect the root care. Don't neglect to get to the root of the thing. Just don't be talking about, I started drinking alcohol, I just like, it just does something for me. I just started drinking. No, you're trying to mask so you don't have to deal with the root of the thing. So you got to continue applying your energy there in the root. What really happened to me? What took place that has me anger? Because anger is the symptoms. Resentment is the symptom, right? So what took place that has me feeling this way? And so recognizing that the fruit or our symptoms can be tied to wounded roots is what makes the difference when it comes down to our approach. And so understanding the spiritual implications of trauma, it enables us to be able to be in a place to where we can truly heal. And so when we say that we truly heal, we're not solely talking about a reduction of symptoms. We're talking about the capacity to be able to flourish and live the life that God intended for us to live. And so when we experience trauma or tragedy, I believe that it pushes us to ask questions sometimes, right? Because we want to ask God, why did this have to happen to me? God, why did you allow the molestation? Why did you allow the divorce? God, why did you allow me to be raped? God, why did you allow certain things? Why did you allow my closest people to me to die, during COVID-19? Why did you allow those things to happen, right? And so we ask those questions because, sometimes the enemy will play with us because the enemy wants us to believe that God is responsible for these things that takes place. God is not responsible. At the core, the Satan is the one that does all of these things, right? And so we have to understand that, trauma will have us in a place to where either we're going to have to trust God and believe that God really wants to heal us and that God is not the one that made Uncle Bobo do what he did to you, and so trauma isn't caused by God. It's a result of the sinful actions of humans towards one another. Trauma is done to us, but sin is done by us, and sin has traumatized the world. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that your trauma was caused by your sin, but I do want to help you understand that there is an intentionality behind many of the abuses that people suffer. When it comes to ourselves, we tend to use, substitute language for sin. We feel more comfortable saying that we've made a mistake rather than saying that we've sinned. So, however, there is a significant difference between a mistake and sin. So don't miss this concept because it's critical to understanding the trauma that you've experienced. Think of some of the moments of, some things that happened to you, whether it was abuse or, that happened throughout your life. Were all of those things mistakes? Probably not. Some of them were sinful choices of other people, right? That left a permanent mark on your life. And if we be real this morning, some of those people that did those things to us have had those things done to them. We don't just wake up and say, oh, I want to go over here and I want to rape somebody, or I want to go over here and I want to molest. We don't just wake up like that. 9 times out of 10, now some people are just evil, but 9 times out of 10, when people, whatever's been done to you, the individual that done it, it's been done to them as well. And so this leads me to the second point. God is not our ally and not our enemy. The devil is, and he used that individual person to do what they did to you. And so too often we are misled to believe the exact opposite. You know, we start viewing God like he the perpetrator or something of our pain rather than the redeemer of it. And so we got to know that the book of Genesis teaches us that through Satan's deception of Adam and Eve, sin entered into the world. And sin has caused trauma ever since. It's been messing us up ever since, right? And so as we begin to think, you know, about trauma, I want to go to Genesis 59 and 20 right quick before we get ready to pray. Because in Genesis 50 and 20, I'm not going to read the scripture. I put it up on the screen. It's supposed to be 50 and 20, excuse me, not 59 and 20, 50 and 20. Joseph said to his brothers, you know, the brothers that faked Joseph's death and sold him to slavery. Joseph said to them, now this is go back and read the entire story at your leisure. You want to talk about trauma? Joseph went through some trauma. Joseph had some soul wounds, right? But you can tell that God did a work on the inside of Joseph, right? Because Joseph said to his brothers, he said, you tried to harm me. And I'm reading this from Genesis 50 and 20, and I'm reading it from the CEV version. It says, you tried to harm me, but God made it turn out for the best so that he could save all these people as he is now doing. And so whatever it is that you have experienced, because we already know, you know, that God is always going to take the things that the enemy uses and he's going to give us a good outcome, right? He's going to cause those things to work together for our good. But many times we got to make sure that we take the attitude that Joseph did, you know, because frequently we mistake outcome for origin. You know, for an example, let's say that a child is adopted out of an abusive home and ends up being a very successful child psychologist. Let's just say that for an example. And so people start saying stuff like, well, I guess God caused them to endure all of that abuse so that she could grow up and help other people. No, God didn't allow her to, sin. It's clear to see God's hand in the outcome, right? The child was adopted out of the abuse, put on the pathway to helping other folks in crisis, but God didn't make her birth parents abuse her. He never intended for children to be harmed by the ones that were supposed to take care of them. That wasn't in his original plan. But when sin entered the world, so did suffering, so did poverty, so did addiction, so did abuse, so did trauma. So yet, even in the brokenness of the world, we can see God's redeeming force. And I want to let you know that when you come face to face with the root of the thing that you're dealing with the brokenness, with the damage, God can take that thing and he can repurpose all of that and still use your life for glory if you allow him to. But as long as you're walking around talking about, I can't forgive them, I'm going to hold on to it till I'm going to take it to the grave, I'm going to hold on. You're going to be yet holding on. And you're going to be yet dealing with all type of depression. You're going to be dealing with all type of anxiety. You're going to be dealing with all types of stuff because we want to hold on to it instead of letting it go. Instead of saying, Lord, I'm broken before you. God, I don't know why the rape had to happen. I don't know why I had to go through the divorce, God. I don't know. But Father God, you know, I release the person. Release them to God. Does that mean that everything gonna be okay? No, the feeling may come back up again, but you've released it to God. And that's what he desires that we do. We got to release those emotions and we got to learn how to deal with what has happened to us. And it takes longer for some than others because once people realize what's going on, they ready to get rid of that stuff. You know, they want it up out of their heart. But like I said, some of us be like, I ain't gonna never forgive. I ain't gonna forgive Uncle Joe for what he did to me. I'm not gonna forgive him. I ain't going to none of the family functions because I don't want to see him. I don't want to come face to face. If you don't feel it, you're not gonna be able to heal it. And that's how you really know that you've been healed, truly. When you can go to the family function and you can see Uncle Bobo, speak to him, keep your boundaries while you're there, speak to him, how you doing, God bless you, and keep it moving, and mean it. And so on this morning, soul wounds. Soul wounds. Can a soul be wounded? And the answer is yes. Yes, a soul can be wounded, but we thank God and glory be to God that when we come face to face and we're ready to let go of some things, that same wounded soul can be redeemed. And so on this morning, we certainly thank God once again for each of you for tuning in with us on this morning. I'm not going to pray us out. I am not going to pray us out this morning. I have another session that I have to do for somebody else, a podcast, and my voice is already just about, it's crackling. It's already crackling. And so I want to be able to go on this lady's podcast and be able to teach and to speak and do what I need to do later on this evening. And so I just pray that as you all go throughout your day, that you all will begin to pray. And this might be a good little moment this morning to, challenge you all that when we get off of here, get on your face and pray. Every morning I lead us in prayer and I don't mind. But however, once again, I have a podcast that I got to do at 6:00. And so my voice is already, I can feel it. I got to get me some hot tea or something, but I can already feel it trying to do something. But anyways, as we close on this morning, when we get off of here, I want you all to go, and I want you to just pray. Even if you all are getting ready to leave to go to work, pray on your way to work. Pray right there in your home before you leave. I want to challenge you to begin to pray, and as you are praying, begin to ask the Lord, begin to ask God to search your heart. God, show me those things that I've forgotten about, things that, have been hidden in my heart that I have literally just forgotten about. And if you're sincere, he'll show it to you. And not only will he show it to you, but if you're a partner with the Holy Spirit, he'll show you how to release it. And so on this morning, y'all go forth on today and y'all pray. I want you all to pray when we get off of here on this morning. And thank you all so much for understanding me not leading us in prayer this morning. Once again, my voice is doing something. So I got to get off of here and drink some hot tea or something so I can be prepared for what I need to do. But God bless you all. Thank you all so much for tuning in with me for the word and prayer. And if it is the will of the Lord, we are going to see you all back here on tomorrow morning for plugging into the power that's only going to take place as we begin to rise up and pray. God bless you. Go forth on today. Have a blessed day.
Open her mouth.